Welcome friends, my name is MicroPython and today I'll be showing you how to get started with the latest, sexiest chip from the Raspberry Pi Foundation. This is the Raspberry Pi Pico. It's a new microcontroller from the Raspberry Pi Foundation, so it's not a full computer like we're normally used to from the Raspberry Pi Foundation, but it's more like an Arduino. I'll be showing you the complete experience from getting a Raspberry Pi Pico and plugging it into your computer for the very first time, to writing a little bit of MicroPython. Connecting your Raspberry Pi Pico to a computer for the first time, do you need drivers? What happens? Let's have a look. We're plugging it in for the very first time now. Now remember, this is a board that I have just unboxed. Here's what the device manager and Windows Explorer looks like. So it already shows up as a flash drive on the right here. It shows up as a 128 megabyte flash drive. And in device manager over here, it shows up as RP2 boot. Now, you can't install any drivers for this RP2 boot. I have given it a try, but it comes back with nothing. But basically, the way that you now install the MicroPython is by dropping a file that we will get now into this flash drive that is the Raspberry Pi. Now, the simplest way to installing MicroPython is on the USB drive that started up, there is an HTML file. And if you double click it and open it up, it will redirect you to the Raspberry Pi website, which then redirects you to the Raspberry Pi Pico website. And on this page, you scroll down, you go to MicroPython. At the top of this page, you click download UF2 file. This takes you to this page. And of course, you download the latest unstable version. Well, I mean, unless you want stable version, you download whichever version you would prefer. Now, once you've downloaded this, you're going to take this file and you're basically just going to copy it into the USB drive from earlier. And when you copy it over, when your copy is done, you will notice that the flash drive disappears. It also disappears from device manager over here. And after a little bit, you get this pop-up here that says board is in FS mode. This is now basically your Raspberry Pi connected to your Windows computer over serial. You can also code it over a terminal where you connect to that COM port over serial and you basically feed it commands. But the way that the Raspberry Pi Foundation themselves recommended is that you download something called the Thony Python IDE. I have used Thony before. It's actually pretty good. I don't know why it isn't a bit bigger in the Python world, although it probably is, and I'm just not bigger in the Python world. So now we download Thony. Once Thony is downloaded, you basically just install it to wherever you need to get it installed. Now, once we've downloaded Thony, we're just going to go to Run, select Interpreter, and in this top drop-down box, we're going to click it and select MicroPython Raspberry Pi Pico. And Thony, well, for me, it's automatically picked COM9, but for you, it would probably say try to detect port automatically. I just like to choose my port specifically. And now if you see this little bit that's here, MicroPython v1.14 on blah, this is the build date. Your Raspberry Pi Pico is working. We're going to write a little bit of Python here just to make sure that it's working. So now when we save this, we're just going to click save there and it brings up this dialog. Now, do you want to save it on this computer? Which we don't. We want to save it on the Raspberry Pi Pico itself. So we click this and this is your Raspberry Pi. So for this, we're just going to name this test.py. You don't need to name this .py in order to run it, but we're going to. You save it. And now when you hit run, you are running this on the MicroPython on the Raspberry Pi itself. And this is how you stop the backend from running if you have something in an infinite loop or something to that effect. There we have it. Now we're running on Raspberry Pi Oil. That is how you very simply plug the Raspberry Pi Pico into your Windows computer and install MicroPython on it and run a little bit of MicroPython on it. There are plenty examples of running MicroPython in the SDK guide, which you can find on the Getting Started page. If you are on the Getting Started page of the Raspberry Pi, you go Getting Started with MicroPython. And if you just scroll down a little bit, you can find the documentation here. And if you click on this PDF, you will basically find tons and tons and tons and tons of examples. This is how to blink a blink the LED that's built into the board forever, all sorts of examples. It's incredibly well documented. So yeah, leave a comment of anything that you have tried with your Raspberry Pi Pico yet. Or have you tried one? Would you like to get one? I mean, yeah, I kind of like them. A lot like the Arduino, but a lot cheaper than an Arduino for me locally. Even in the case of the cheap Chinese clones of the Arduinos, they are double the price of a Raspberry Pi Pico, which is an official board. So not too bad.